Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Books Podcast with your host, Gloria and Rogan. And today we're excited to dive into a special book with you. We've picked this one because it has some really important lessons to share, and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
All right. Ready to have your mind blown wide open when it comes to generating incredible business ideas?
I am. And, you've brought the perfect book to the table to help us do exactly that.
I know, right? This book, The Business Idea Factory, just grabbed me right from the jump. Andrii Sedniev, the author, he just gets it.
He does. It's funny because, I've read a ton of these books about business and brainstorming, and they all kind of blend together. But this one, like you said, it just grabs you.
It really does. I think it's because it feels super practical. It's not just like, oh, be more creative. It actually digs into like the nitty-gritty of how our brains come up with ideas, and then it gives us tools to like make that process more intentional.
Absolutely. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because Seddy, he talks about how we all have this idea factory inside of us. I love that analogy.
Right. Like we're all capable of coming up with amazing ideas. It's just a matter of like learning how to tap into that potential.
Exactly. So in your view, how does he suggest we, flip the switch on that factory? Where do we even begin?
Well, he talks about this thing called the think and rest technique, which I thought was super interesting. Have you ever struggled with a problem for ages and then boom, the solution just hits you when you're in the shower or something?
Oh, all the time. It's like my best thinking happens when I'm not even trying.
Right. And Sadie explains that it's not just a coincidence. He says that while our conscious mind might be taking a break, our subconscious is still working on the problem in the background.
That makes so much sense. It's like giving your brain permission to wander and make those connections that it might not have made otherwise.
Totally. And this whole idea that sometimes the best way to be creative is to step away from our desks and do something completely unrelated. It's a recurring theme in the book.
It is. Remember that part about idea showers? I mean, come on. Who knew showering could be so good for brainstorming?
Right. I've definitely had some of my best ideas in the shower, but I never really stopped to think about why that is.
Me neither. It's like he's giving us permission to just relax and let our minds wander. I think that's so important, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation.
Totally. It's like we need to create those spaces for our brains to just breathe and be creative.
Absolutely. But okay, I have to ask, what did you think about that faster horse analogy?
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, Seddy talks about how sometimes we get so caught up in trying to make incremental improvements to existing things that we miss out on the opportunity to create something totally new.
Yeah. Instead of trying to create a faster horse, what if we invented the car?
Exactly. It's about challenging those default assumptions and really pushing ourselves to think outside the box.
Right. And he tells this great story about Edwin Land, the inventor of the Polaroid camera.
Okay, yes. Tell me you're about to tell that story because I love that story.
I am. Okay, so the story goes, Land is on vacation with his little girl, right? And they're taking pictures with his camera like you do.
Of course. Vacay pics are the best.
Right. So the daughter, she's like, Dad, why can't I see the picture now?
Kids. Always wanting things instantly.
Right. But here's the thing. Instead of just brushing her off or whatever, Land really hears her question.
And boom, the Polaroid is born. I mean, I'm simplifying a bit, but it's such a good example of how those simple questions, the ones we might overlook, can spark huge innovations.
Totally. It's like Sadie is saying, don't underestimate the power of a fresh perspective.
100%. And that actually reminds me of another point he made about the importance of learning from others and actively seeking out inspiration from different sources.
Oh, for sure. He says something like, innovation rarely happens in a vacuum.
Yes. And then he gives the example of MTV, how it combined music and television, which, duh, those things existed already, but no one had put them together in quite that way before.
Exactly. Sometimes it's about taking two familiar things and finding that unexpected connection.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about tapping into our subconscious, challenging our assumptions, finding inspiration in unexpected places, but what about the actual brainstorming process itself? Once we have all these ideas swirling around, how do we actually make sense of them all?
So that's where Seddy gets really tactical, which I appreciate. He introduces this thing called the 125-1 rule.
Yeah, okay. I am all ears because that sounds intriguingly specific.
It is. So step one, you brainstorm like crazy. No judgment, just get those ideas out there, aim for 100, even if some of them are totally wild.
Just let it flow.
Exactly. Then you take a step back and choose your top 20 ideas. This is where you start thinking about things like, is this actually feasible? Or does this align with my overall goals?
Got it. So you're narrowing it down. And then what?
All right, so this is where you bring in some outside perspective. Show those 20 ideas to some trusted friends, colleagues, mentors, people who will give you honest feedback.
Because sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees, you know?
For sure. And their insights can help you narrow that list down even further to your top 5 most promising ideas.
Okay, I'm liking this framework. From 100 down to 5, it feels way less overwhelming than just trying to sift through a jumbled mess of ideas.
Right. It's like a roadmap.
Yeah.
And speaking of making things feel less daunting, I love how Sedniev talks about failure.
Oh, yes. He's all about embracing failure.
Totally. He even shares some of his own setbacks and what he learned from them, which I thought was really cool.
It's like even the most successful people mess up sometimes. It's part of the process.
Exactly. And that's something he emphasizes throughout the book, the importance of cultivating what he calls a growth mindset.
It's true. It's like we're so scared of getting it wrong that we don't even try.
Right. Like, what's the worst that could happen? We learned something.
Exactly. And then we can take that lesson and apply it to our next attempt.
Totally. He actually says something like, failure is just a stepping stone on the path to success.
I love that.
It's so true. It's like every time we try something new, we're gathering data, even if it doesn't work out the way we planned.
Exactly. So even those failures, they're valuable.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about embracing failure, but what about those random bursts of inspiration that seem to come out of nowhere?
Oh, you mean those aha moments? Sadie calls them idea sparks.
Yes, I love that. Idea sparks. How do we make sure we don't lose those? Well, he says it's super important to capture them somehow, whether you jot it down, sketch it out, even just tell someone else about it.
Ooh, I'm a big fan of the jotting it down method.
Me too. I always have a notebook with me.
Same, because those ideas, they can come at the most random times.
Right. I've gotten some of my best ideas while folding laundry or something.
Totally. It's like our brains are always working, even when we don't realize it.
Exactly. Okay, but it's not enough to just have those ideas. We have to do something with them, right?
Right. And that's where getting feedback comes in, which Sadie also talks about.
Yes. He emphasizes the importance of having a creative buddy or a group of people you trust to bounce ideas off of.
Because sometimes we're just too close to our own ideas to see them objectively.
Totally. We need that outside perspective.
And not just any perspective, people who will be honest with us, even if it's not what we want to hear.
Absolutely. Because sometimes the most helpful feedback is the kind that makes us rethink our whole approach.
Right. It's oh, I didn't think about it that way.
Exactly. It's all about growth,
Totally. So I guess the big takeaway here is that we all have the potential to be these amazing idea-generating machines.
Yes, and Sedniev's book gives us the tools to actually make that happen.
It's not about some magical talent or anything.
Right. It's about building those creative habits and creating the conditions for those aha moments to occur.
I love that. So for our listener who's feeling inspired right now, what's the one thing you hope they take away from the Business Idea Factory?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think it would be this. Don't be afraid to experiment. Try new things, even if you're not sure they'll work. Embrace those idea sparks and see where they lead you. You never know what amazing things you might create.
Such a great point. It's the journey is just as important as the destination.
Totally. And even if those ideas don't turn into the next billion-dollar business, the process of coming up with them, of flexing those creative muscles, is so rewarding in itself.
I love that. It's about tapping into that part of ourselves that loves to create, to innovate, to explore new possibilities. And you know what? That's something we can all benefit from, regardless of whether we're entrepreneurs or artists or just regular people trying to navigate this crazy thing called life.
So well said. It's about bringing more creativity and innovation into every aspect of our lives.
Yes. And with that, I think we've given our listeners a whole lot to think about. So until next time, keep those idea factories humming.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care and keep learning, keep growing.